Hello everyone, my name is Tyler Warlow, I go by the Mengineer, and I'm here to help you engineer your life. Let's jump into it. Today I wanted to talk about a book I just recently finished reading called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Now, I want to start this video off by saying this is by no means a professional interpretation. I'm just some guy on the internet giving his ideas and his opinions on this book. So just want to start that off with that disclaimer, and let's go ahead and jump into the video. This book is all about habits and the mechanisms and the psychology that goes behind it. The book examines habits by looking at several different case studies of individuals, companies, and lab experiments, all looking at how habits are formed, how they're established, or how they're remade from what they are. It looks at several real life examples, touching on Alcoholics Anonymous as well as successful football teams. But there is one important thing to know about this book. This book is not a guide on how to form habits or how to build habits. If that's what you're looking for out of this book, that's not what you're going to get. Rather, it's going to give you the mechanisms and the tools behind establishing habits, so that way you can kind of take those mechanisms and those tools based on the examples that are provided in the book and then apply them to your own life. So let's hop into some of the things that I gathered from this book, as well as how I interpreted the information that was presented. So one of the biggest takeaways that I took away from this book is that all habits are established by something called the habit loop. And those habit loops are comprised of three different parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. And this can be applied to almost any habit, whether that's if you look at people who are habitual smokers, people who exercise regularly, people who snack habitually. This loop applies to both good and negative habits. So it's a really powerful tool to understand, so that way you can make adjustments to things that you want to in your life. The habits that are formed using this habit loop are formed in your brain to make it something that is more automatic, because your brain has to use energy to make choices. So the more that your brain can automatize the process and make it so you have to make less decisions, the more efficient that your brain is going to get. So those habits are established to become pretty much automatic, so that your brain uses less energy having to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. A very simple example of a positive habit being used by the habit loop is having your clothes set out the day before, your exercise clothes set out. So as soon as you see them, you think about your routine to change into them and go for a run, for example. Then your routine is the actual run. Your reward is the endorphins, the dopamine, the kind of feel-good chemicals that you get from doing that run. Conversely, how that habit loop could be applied to a bad habit is habitual smoking. So your cue would be probably seeing the pack of cigarettes or seeing someone else seeing the pack of cigarettes. I know personally, I kind of like the smell of cigarettes, so that could be the cue for someone. Then, of course, that would trigger the routine to smoke a cigarette, and then the reward for that is the nicotine rush that you get from smoking a cigarette. And those are just a couple of examples. These, again, apply to nearly all habits. Now, another key takeaway that I took from this book is there are key habits called keystone habits. And those keystone habits are a singular habit that when you make a change and you focus on really establishing that keystone habit, it kind of leaks into other areas of your life. So a kind of key example to look at is, let's say someone wants to exercise. They really focus on exercising 3 days a week to the point where it becomes automatic and it becomes a habit. Well, once they start focusing on that habit and it's kind of become that automatic, you start seeing that leak into other areas of their life, right? A lot of people that exercise habitually start to eat healthier because it helps them feel better while they're exercising. They start to just feel better and more confident in themselves because they see the physical changes in their body. And then it can go into their work because they have more energy from exercising, so they're able to be more productive. So that one habit that they focused on starts to leak into and bleed into the different areas of their life and lead to other habitual changes that causes their life to change overall. The book uses an example of a company that was able to turn around its profits and climb back up to the top of its sector by focusing on safety of all things. And by focusing on that safety principle, that led to changes throughout the entire organization that over time led to the organization making important changes overall, that led to the organization reorganizing itself and repositioning itself as a top competitor in its industry. Now, the book also talks about two other important aspects that are important for really establishing a habit. Because one thing to know is, as a lot of people will attest to, is that you can form a habit, you can stick to it maybe for a month or two, but then life kind of can get in the way, right? Something comes up where you're not able to do XYZ, and then that habit kind of falls to the wayside, and then you don't pick it back up again. So what's the key to really making those habits stick then? The book indicates that the two main ways to really make those habits stick are: one, create a craving for the reward that is associated with that habit. And secondly, you must really instill a belief in that habit. Instill a belief that that habit will bring about whatever change is being sought out. In terms of creating a craving for a reward, let's look at a little example. A lot of students struggle to motivate themselves to study their course material, and that's understandable. To a lot of students, studying is a very tedious and hard process, and really, what's the reward that they get at the end of it? It's very hard for a lot of students to motivate themselves to consistently study when the reward commonly associated with consistently studying is associated with the improved grade on exams, which is typically 3 to 4 weeks away. And for some students, that reward is enough to motivate them to continue studying. For other students, you might want to approach it a little bit differently. For example, when I was in my sophomore year of college, I wasn't doing too well in my physics class. I wasn't failing, but I would have liked to do better. So I signed up for tutoring through my university, and what I would do to make it something that I would look forward to was every time that I went to the library for that tutoring session, I got my favorite coffee drink from the coffee shop in order to kind of provide myself with a reward for doing that. If you're a student who's trying to motivate themselves to more consistently study, maybe give yourself a reward, something that you truly enjoy after studying, and make that a consistent thing. Then that creates the craving for that reward, and you associate it with the studying process. Now, touching on the belief side of that kind of thing, a lot of habits tend to fall out because people don't hold true belief in them. Touching back on the studying example, a lot of students, especially if they don't see the results of their labor right off the bat, kind of get into this mindset of, well, what's the point of studying anyway if I'm just going to get the same grade if I cram? And then they'll eventually fall back into that cramming habit, just waiting in the last second. But that's why it's truly important to instill in yourself the belief that this habit is going to work, the belief that consistently doing this is going to be able to bring about change. A lot of studies show that by simply believing that sticking to the habit will help enact the change that you want to see, it helps drive the person to stick with said habit, and as a result, by sticking with said habit, they achieve the results that they want to achieve. Now, another thing that a lot of people want to talk about and discuss is how to either build new habits or change existing ones, and that's something that this book touches on a little bit. And in order to do that, we're going to, of course, go back to that habit loop, right? Of the cue, the routine, and the reward. First off, you're going to want to identify whatever the cue is for your routine and the reward for that routine. And the book uses an example of a habitual nail biter. The cue for her nail biting was typically that she was bored, and then the reward was that she was getting the physical stimulation of that nail biting. The nail biter was able to identify what her cue was by consistently writing down and noting what she was doing, what she was feeling whenever she did get that urge to bite her nails. It's important to establish why you do a routine, establish that cue and reward, And then you can experiment by, when you notice that you're getting a cue, maybe change up the routine, give yourself a different reward, and see how that results in changes to a habit. One thing that the book kind of touches on is that you shouldn't try to establish a whole bunch of habits all at once, right? Because the book touches on a point that willpower is a finite resource. A lot of people look at some people and say, holy cow, how are they able to do that? They have so much motivation. I wish that I could stick to my plans and do that as consistently as they do. But studies have shown that when someone is tasked with doing something that requires willpower earlier on in the day, they have a harder time exercising that willpower later down the road on other tasks. However, willpower can be exercised. It can be improved over time. That's why so many people recommend doing intense exercise of some form. The saying goes is that it calluses the brain, right? And that's because when you put yourself through these strenuous situations multiple times over and over and over again, you kind of become accustomed to it and you start to build up more willpower over time. But the reason that this is important to forming habits is if you try to establish way too many habits all at once, you're going to use a lot of that willpower, and eventually you're going to run out of willpower, and it's going to make it hard to stick to all those habits. And this kind of goes back to touching on that keystone habit. So what I recommend, based on what it says in this book, is to focus on really getting one habit that you really care about down and automatic. Really focus on believing on improving on that habit. Really focus on establishing it as a habit. What a different YouTuber I follow, Matt Diavella, says is he has a 2-day rule of when he's trying to establish a new habit, he never takes more than 2 days off from that habit to ensure that he's consistently sticking with it. And by doing that over time, he ensures that it becomes cemented in his routines and it becomes automatic rather than just another task that you're having to actually put thought into every day. Now I'm just going to jump into some of my final thoughts regarding the book. The book doesn't really give you a how-to on how to make different habits in your life. However, in the appendix, the author does give a nice little framework based on all the tools that he gives the readers. So just going over that brief, that's first going to be identify the routine. So find the habit that you're trying to make. Second, that's going to be experiment with rewards. So try different routines that give you different rewards. Figure out what really drives that craving for you, the craving for the reward. Third, it's going to be isolating the cue. Now the author gives a nice way of doing this. He recommends anytime that you kind of notice the habit starting, you write down 5 things. Those 5 things are the location, the time, the emotional state that you're in, the different people that are around you, and the action that you were taking that immediately preceded that. And then finally, have a plan. Write down your plan. Once you've identified all the other 3 steps, write down what you're going to do to establish that routine. Now to end this off, I just want to reiterate that if you're looking for a book that's going to detail a how-to for you and give you a step-by-step method on how to build new habits and help you apply those to your day-to-day life, this isn't the book for you. This book is more about giving you the tools and the methods behind establishing those habits and then allowing you to take those tools and methods and apply them to your own life. It's up to you whether or not you utilize that knowledge effectively. In summary, this book covers the mechanism behind habits, or the habit loop. It dives into why habits have been seen to fail or succeed, and then it gives interesting details into various case studies that exhibit habits taking place in the real world. I found the book to be really interesting because it touched on real world examples that I had personally dealt with and seen, but never really understood the deeper psychology behind them. And it caused me to have some of these whoa moments as I understood some of the things that I had seen just happening in everyday life. Of course, if you're interested in reading the book yourself and learning more behind these habits, I'm going to provide a link down in the description description below. Feel free to follow that and purchase the book, support the author, of course. If you have any thoughts or ideas about how the concepts from today's episode apply to you or your life, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I'd love to have a discussion about it. As always, I will have my most recent video posted right here. And if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And this is the Mengineer signing off.